You push your cart up to the register on a Tuesday evening. Milk, eggs, bread, coffee, the exact same short list you've bought for years. And the total flashes up higher than last month and higher than last year. You get home, turn on the news, and a calm voice reports that inflation is sitting at a mild 3%. You stare at the receipt in your hand. The natural assumption is that someone in Washington is lying to you. But what if nobody is cooking the books? Take a look at this model. The official inflation number, the Consumer Price Index, is not a literal tracker of your actual shopping cart. It's tracking a carefully engineered simulation, a fixed basket of goods. Statisticians at the Bureau of Labor Statistics design this basket in advance to represent what a typical urban household buys. They track those specific prices over time, updating the basket on a rigid schedule, not the moment your personal spending habits change. That design choice is why the official number and your receipt refuse to meet. The index is built as an architecture of filters, deliberately smoothing out the raw, unadjusted friction of your everyday spending. The first filter is substitution. This line chart shows how the math handles human behavior. When the cost of beef climbs, real shoppers don't just keep buying steak and shrug. They switch to chicken. The CPI formulas account for this, assuming you will trade down to something cheaper when prices rise. But look at the gap between those two lines. The index stops tracking the price of the life you wanted and starts tracking the price of the cheaper life you settled for. The mathematical drop quietly edits out the financial frustration of having to make that trade. Then there is hedonic quality adjustment. If you buy a new laptop that costs exactly the same as last year's model, but it runs twice as fast, the government logs that transaction as a price cut. You are getting more computing power for the same dollar. Your phone bill didn't fall. The thing in your hand cost what it cost. Yet inside the index, better can register as cheaper, and the official number drifts a little further from the number you paid. Substitution and hedonic adjustments logically track behavior and quality, but they systematically scrub away the exact financial friction that consumers define as inflation. A team of economists studying grocery scanner data found that human brains build their internal inflation gauge based on how often they see a price. We feel price hikes most acutely in things we buy constantly, like a jug of milk, a loaf of sliced bread, and filling up with gas. But the CPI does the exact opposite. This animated scale visualizes how the index weights categories by total household dollars spent. A single car purchase might happen once a decade, yet its massive price tag gives it heavy weight in the index. The frequent grocery trips that form your gut sense of inflation end up as the lightest items in the math. Which brings us to the single heaviest piece of the entire index. Housing makes up about a third of the fixed basket. So how does the government measure the cost of keeping a roof over your head? Watch what happens in this model. The index completely ignores actual home prices and your monthly mortgage payment. It uses something called owner's equivalent rent. Statisticians estimate what a house would rent for, stripping out down payments and interest rates entirely, and replacing the cost of buying an asset with a slow-moving, imagined rental value. When you ignore the actual cost of borrowing money, you miss the financial reality of the housing market entirely. Economists like Larry Summers built an alternative index that actually includes interest rates and financing costs. They found that while the official CPI sat under 3%, real lived inflation, driven by borrowing costs, was running closer to 9%. By weighting categories by total spending instead of daily frequency, and erasing real mortgage costs in favor of hypothetical rent, the index creates a smoothed average. It perfectly describes a macroeconomic trend while matching absolutely no one's actual life. Before we declare the official number entirely broken, consider the historical context. In the 1990s, a group of economists known as the Boskin Commission examined the CPI and concluded it was actually running too hot, overstating inflation by over a full percentage point a year. If the index failed to account for how people switched to cheaper goods, that minor error would compound. The CPI dictates Social Security checks, tax brackets, and countless federal contracts. Leaving those behavioral adjustments out would artificially cost the government hundreds of billions of dollars over time. Even within the government, different institutions choose different numbers. The Federal Reserve prefers a metric called the PCE, which updates its spending weights every month rather than once a year. Because it captures your substitutions faster, it usually runs even lower than the CPI. Two careful models, two different numbers. The high grocery receipt in your hand and the low official percentage on the screen can both be correct at exactly the same time. They are simply answering two different questions. The CPI is trying to answer one narrow, specific question. How much more does it cost to buy roughly the same standard of living as before, adjusting for trade-offs and quality? Your gut is answering a different question. How much does my life feel like it costs right now, weighted toward the prices that hit me most often and hurt the most? Economic literacy is the ability to respect the official index for the narrow, specific architecture it is, while trusting your own receipt for the raw reality it measures. You can hold both truths in your head at once, without needing one of them to be a liar.